Good evening, you're listening to The Truth Tank and I'm your host, The Tank. If this is your first time listening to The Truth Tank, a big welcome. If you're a repeat listener, welcome back. Got some big news. I finally got a new computer. Well, it's not really new, it's pre-owned new, so better than nothing. It works, does its job so far, fingers crossed. So I'll be able to go bigger and better and push the show further than I could on the old hardware. I had that computer for 12, 13 years. It was a loyal companion through thick and thin. It did its job, but unfortunately it was pretty much fucked. No memory, not a lot of it worked. Lots of the keys were missing, so I've got a replacement. It's bigger and better, and I'll be able to have guests very soon when I work out how to do it and get through the backlog of episodes I recorded on the old computer, which transferring wasn't actually that hard. I was expecting it to take a day or so, but it only took a couple of seconds. Drag and drop, that was it. I did have to wait for a multi-port adapter. I had to buy that separately because, of course, the newer Macs don't have any ports on them, except for 4 Lightning ports, which are good, they're fast, but ultimately useless if you've been doing things like a caveman for the past 13 years. So this will be the first episode recorded on the new computer. It's sounding good. It's a lot smoother. It keeps up better. The battery fucking works. Once again, fingers crossed. I've got a bigger screen. I can actually read what I'm doing. I don't have to worry about it running out of memory because it's got heaps. I don't have to delete anything after this and risk losing half of a show and having to record it again tomorrow. So I'm hoping this is going to streamline the process. On tonight's show, we're going to be looking at the latest installment of the Planet of the Apes franchise, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I'm a big fan of Planet of the Apes. I think it's a great concept for a sci-fi movie. It's pretty terrifying when you think about it. A world where apes have become the superior species and humans have been knocked down a few pegs. And a big announcement, I think I mentioned this on the last show, the live communism is finally done after 2.5 years. 421 pages. The research and writing has finally finished and it can go into production. I'm planning on recording December, January. The first part will be out in March 2025, so definitely mark that in your calendars. The live begins March 2025. So the first part of the episode will be having a look at Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, but make sure you stick around after the review for some post-apocalyptic fun. Before we get into the review of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, let's walk back through the Planet of the Apes films. There's been so many of them. There's the original, 5 or 6, the Tim Burton Reboot or remake, whatever you want to call it, and the Andy Serkis Trilogy, which I think are my favourites, especially the Matt Reeves directed Dawn and War of the Planet of the Apes. Now let's get into tonight's show. This is episode 60 of The Truth Tank, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes review and post-apocalyptic fun.
Hi, I'm Natasha with Cryptids, Creeps, and Conspiracy. Embark with me on a journey to uncover the details involving cryptids, haunted houses, and unsolved mysteries. Get ready to awaken your curiosity and explore the unknown. Ask questions, and together, let's unravel the secrets behind the legends.
It's been a fair break in between Planet of the Apes films. I didn't even know they were making another one until I saw the trailer of it in the cinema a couple of months ago. I never even heard about one going into production, and turns out there was one. The last Planet of the Apes movie to come out, War of the Planet of the Apes, came out in 2017. So it's been, more than a few years since the last Apes film. I always liked the Planet of the Apes films. I'm a fan of the originals. The Mark Wahlberg one was pretty average. I respect what Tim Burton was trying to do, using the old school costumes and prosthetics rather than just special effects, and that was at a time when film was changing and a lot of movies were going digital. Special effects were becoming more the norm, even though I think that was 2000, 2001, 2002, something like that. So, roughly 20 something years ago. It would have been a challenge to do all special effects because effects weren't fantastic back then. They were getting good. I think episode 2 kind of pushed the envelope for visual effects and digital characters, so it probably could have been done. I think the hair and the fur was probably going to be the biggest problem. But it was cool to have big name actors dressed as apes in prosthetics and costumes. It was very nostalgic of the originals, but unfortunately the film wasn't that great. So it's been a few years since Planet of the Apes films. The last one came out in 2017, and that was War of the Planet of the Apes. So I was a bit surprised when I saw a trailer for a new Planet of the Apes film. I thought, oh wow, that's pretty cool. Didn't know that was in production, and turns out it was made here in Australia, in New South Wales. Could have been an extra in it, but I didn't know. There's a little bit of a giveaway because there's a lot of shots of gum trees, and it looks very much like the Australian bush, as opposed to the redwood forests in the Andy Serkis Trilogy. While the trailers for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes looked really good, I was a bit skeptical about a new Planet of the Apes film. The director, Wes Ball, I hadn't really heard of before. He's made the Maze Runner films and a couple of short films, but he hasn't done much more than that, and the last Maze Runner film came out quite a while ago. I was a bit skeptical that he'd be able to pull off a story as layered and as complex and as anticipated as Planet of the Apes. The other big question was, do we need another Planet of the Apes? Because I feel like the last trilogy was pretty fucking good. It was a great prequel and a good way to go back and kickstart a new era of Planet of the Apes without rehashing or trying to remake the classic original ape films. And I know not all of them are great. The last probably 2 or 3 they're okay, but they're nothing special. From memory, the first 2 or 3 are really good. The first and second are by far the standouts. Third one's good, could have been better. I think the first one, I think the first 2 have Charlton Heston, and they kind of go in a separate direction after that. The one where the 2 apes go back in time to the circus in 1970s is a bit whack. It's very reminiscent of that Star Trek movie where they go back in time to save the whales. That's probably one of my favourite Star Trek films. That one was great, but it doesn't quite work the same for Planet of the Apes. The Tim Burton one's okay. As I mentioned before, it's good that it's prosthetics and actors and stuff, but it kind of tries too hard to reboot the original, but do it in a slightly more modernish way, and I don't think it really works. I think it's a bit too... It tries too hard to be different sometimes, and too nostalgic in other places. It's been probably 15 years since I've seen that movie, probably more than that. I liked it when it came out. On the one hand, you respect it for being nostalgic and, like I said, having the costumes and the prosthetics and that, and sticking true to the original Planet of the Apes. I think its biggest problem is it does fail when it does try to do things original and get away from the originals, like the end battle of that film with the spaceship, and it's just a bit, kind of tacky 2000s sci-fi. But it was okay for the time. It just didn't age very well. Then, they didn't make a Planet of the Apes film for about 12 years until Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and I got excited when I heard they were going to do a prequel and set up how, Planet of the Apes progressed, because you have to have a explanation and a prequel film for everything now. You can't just have something that is set in a world at point A. You have to go back and explain how we got to point A. It works and it doesn't work sometimes. The upcoming Furiosa, which I will be doing an episode on, looks fucking incredible. While Furiosa in Mad Max Fury Road probably wasn't the most interesting character, she was okay, but I wasn't thinking when I was watching it, we need a film about Furiosa. I was thinking we need another Mad Max film now. But, George Miller is a genius, and he has figured out a way to make it work, still keeping it in the world and not have Mad Max in it. Only problem is it took a long time to make. It's been about nearly 10 years since Fury Road came out. But going back to Planet of the Apes, the Andy Serkis Trilogy was great. It just does its own thing. It utilises visual effects and modern technology, motion capture, to tell the story without relying on the suits. And I think it actually works better because the apes actually look real and it's much scarier rather than having just actors in suits. Yeah, the actors in suits was great, but there's limitations. Where this one, there was absolutely no limitations to it whatsoever. And War of the Planet of the Apes leaves the door open for a new trilogy, maybe one is set in the future that could coincide with the originals, or just go on a whole separate path and just do its own thing. I think it'd be much better if they just steer clear of the originals and just do their own original thing, which looks like that is the plan. And it opens up a whole new world for Planet of the Apes, and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is the first installment of a new trilogy, I'm pretty sure. It's definitely set up that way, and there's been, fucking 10 Planet of the Apes films so far, so they're probably not going to stop making them anytime soon. Fox needs some decent IP to make a profit, and sci-fi seems to be the only thing they really put the time and money into anymore. I mean, they'll make a lot of movies, Fox Studios obviously, but sci-fi was always their bread and butter. It was always what they were good at. They were always known as the sci-fi studio, so, stick to what you know. So let's get down to it. So as I mentioned before, I was a little skeptical going into a new Planet of the Apes film. What's it going to be like? What period is this set? How are they going to top the Serkis Trilogy? These are questions that were all answered on Saturday when I went to see it. Right from the get-go and the opening scenes, this movie just drops you straight into this new world where humans have pretty much disappeared except for small pockets of them, hiding out and scavenging to survive. Apes reign supreme, but there are multiple groups of apes, all with different hierarchies and different ways of living. The opening scenes of the overgrown cities and rivers running through streets were really cool, very post-apocalyptic, but very surreal and almost calming, seeing these buildings covered in trees. It really does get to the core of maybe human beings should be living closer to nature rather than trying to isolate themselves from it, living in white and grey houses with lots of modern appliances and artificial lighting where everything's very sanitized and sterile. Same goes for office cubicles. They're very non-human friendly. They're very fake and artificial. It nearly makes you feel guilty for living in a very sterile, industrialized environment, walking around with an iPhone in your pocket and going home to white painted walls and everything being nice and IKEA-ish. Those scenes were very striking, and right from the get-go we're dropped into the action. And this is where we're introduced to the new characters of the film. The three young apes. Noah, played by Owen Teague. I think it's pronounced Noah or Noah, something like that. Anya, played by Travis Jeffrey. And Suna. They're climbing the decaying, rotting buildings left over by humans. The eagles have taken up residence on the top of the buildings. They lay their eggs up there, away from the prying eyes of the apes. The young apes are climbing the buildings in a rite of passage to collect eagle eggs as a part of their bonding day. And this is another aspect I liked. The apes, much like humans used to do and still do, using birds to their advantage. They have to pick and collect an egg and keep it on them at all times. They have a little leather sling that they stuff in to keep the egg warm. They have to care for the egg until it hatches and then raise the eagle and become bonded with it. The tribe that the apes belong to are the Eagle tribe. They're a very peaceful tribe of apes. They live in these giant wooden structures in the forest. They have a big aviary at the top of it. They use the eagles for hunting, to hunt fish, which is what humans thousands of years used to do and still do in some parts of the world. I saw a documentary where I think it was a tribe in Mongolia or somewhere uses hawks to hunt rabbits and hares. And this is more or less what the apes are doing. The young apes have to climb up the decaying buildings in order to collect eggs. There are some great shots of the overgrown cities, and we're only a couple of minutes into the film and the action starts. We're dropped straight into the action, and it's a really great way to kickstart a new trilogy. And as I said before about it being shot in Australia, it is a dead giveaway because there's a lot of gum trees right from the get-go. The rocks too are a bit of a giveaway that it was filmed in Australia and not in a studio somewhere, which is good, like, because there's a lot of special effects in this film, and a lot of the sets and locations are actually real outdoor environments, which adds a layer of realism to this film. The Andy Serkis Trilogy did the same thing, shooting out in real natural environments as opposed to creating the environments digitally, like Avatar. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but for Planet of the Apes, it definitely adds a layer of realism, because obviously they're living in the fucking wild, so why bother recreating it digitally when you can just go outside and do it? So the story is set generations after War of the Planet of the Apes and the death of Caesar. Bit of a spoiler alert. Kind of goes without saying, spoilers are ahead, so if you haven't seen it, probably should stop listening now. It's a good timeline to set the film. It doesn't clash with War of the Planet of the Apes. There's a far enough gap in between films where you don't have to explain everything post War of the Planet of the Apes. You can just kickstart a new trilogy but still have it linked to the old one, because Caesar is mentioned a fair bit in the film, and there's a lot of little Easter eggs relating to War of the Planet of the Apes that connect both trilogies in a really cool way. It also avoids the trap of a lot of modern sequels these days. It doesn't have to rewrite or reboot a trilogy that was only made like 7 or 8 years ago, which seems to be a big trend in Hollywood. They release sequels to a legacy IP, 20 or 30 years down the track, make them, they're not that good, and then they end up remaking them or rebooting them 5 to 6 years down the track because the original reboot was so fucking shit. This is not the case here. They definitely favour quality over quantity. There also doesn't seem to be any competition with the previous trilogy. It's happy to just exist in its own world and do its own thing and not get too pressured by what the Andy Serkis Trilogy had done, which is, once again, great. They set it many generations, as it says in the film, after the death of Caesar. Because that was one of the bigger questions I had, was when is this film going to be set? Is this just going to be another tribe springing up after Caesar, trying to copy him? And that's kind of what I thought it was going to do. So we're introduced to the new apes, the new eagle tribe, a new city, a new world of Planet of the Apes, and we're just dropped straight into this very real and natural feeling world. And the film is about 2 hours and 25 minutes. It does take its time to build up a story rather than just go 1,000 miles an hour. It builds a very rich and vibrant world, and as I keep saying, it feels very believable and very realistic because it's shot out in nature. There's some great set design in this film. It also avoids the trap of a lot of dystopian post-apocalyptic films and set it in a recognizable city like New York or Los Angeles or London or somewhere like that. It's just a generic looking remnants of the quote-unquote human world, which is cool because you don't know what country it's set in, and that's going back to, like, it's connected to the last trilogy, but it's doing its own thing. Caesar is mentioned, so obviously the legend of Caesar has spread throughout the ape world. Everybody knows him, and he's become this godlike figure. And rather than have recognizable landmarks like the original Planet of the Apes used, the Statue of Liberty, the Serkis Trilogy used the Golden Gate Bridge. This one doesn't really seem to pick a landmark. There's a bridge that pops up later in the film that kind of looks like the Golden Gate Bridge, but it's kind of hard to tell because everything at this point is rusted over and crusty and very decayed, which I liked because all the background shit is the old rotting human world that has been slowly overtaken by this new ape empire. And I just love that part of the film. There's the shell, the old human world, and life has just gone on. Vegetation has grown over the old human world and the apes are just living in it, because this generation of apes isn't that familiar with humans. They call them echoes, and I think it's mentioned that it's been a long time since they've seen an echo. At this point in the story, humans are basically like feral scavengers like they were in the original Planet of the Apes. They can't talk and they're more or less just cavemen. And a lot of apes haven't seen them or don't encounter humans very often, as opposed to the last film where humans were still hanging in there. So we're introduced to the new characters, and just as soon as we get used to this new world, the new apes attack. Chaos descends onto the Eagle tribe, and we're introduced to the antagonists of the film, because not all apes in this film are the same. They're not all from the same tribe. They all have different beliefs and hierarchies. Some are more militaristic than others. And once again, another cool realistic factor, because not all humans are the same. And this is something the original trilogy doesn't go into that much. It's mentioned in the last film, the fifth or sixth one, I can't remember the name of it. But in the original, it's more or less just one tribe of apes. And this one's a different story. So this new tribe is very militaristic. They come and destroy the village, start rounding up the apes and taking them off and burn it to the ground. So after the night attack, Noah just escapes and sets out into the wilderness to find his tribe. He's cast out into the wild, where he's forced to survive by himself. It's not too long after he encounters a orangutan named Raikou, or Raka, something like that. And if you're familiar with Planet of the Apes films, the orangutans are always the wise, logical teachers. And this orangutan is a devotee of the original belief in Caesar's teachings. And that's another thing this film gets into quite a bit, is the power of belief and how dangerous belief and essentially religion can be if it's twisted and put into the wrong hands. Because a lot of the ape tribes believe in a slightly different version of the Caesar story and his teachings. Caesar believes in humans and apes living side by side. This new tribe of apes is very militaristic and believes in ape supremacy and rising up and taking over what is left of the remnants of humanity. This movie does a very good job of keeping this new tribe very mysterious. They're pretty frightening. They wear armor like the originals. They've got fur and these wooden masks on and these taser cattle prod stun sticks that they use to round up the villagers. And this new tribe refers to the teachings of Caesar, but in a different version to Raikou's beliefs. Once Noah encounters Raikou, his worldview changes. He's opened up to the possibility that not everything he's been taught is correct, and that the world is a much bigger place than he thought it was. Raikou is also a keeper of knowledge. He collects books, and when Noah discovers books, he tells him that these are left over from the humans, these symbols mean something, and that he is the guardian of knowledge. Raikou fills Noah in about the teachings of Caesar, the real teachings, and how easy it is to pervert these teachings and beliefs. I did like the part about the books. Raikou is this guardian of ancient knowledge, and that comes to him in the form of old books and stories. Even if he doesn't know what the symbols mean, he sees the importance of it, and it is literally human history recorded in print. Any electronic device is absolutely useless at this point. It's more or less just a plastic artifact. Mobile phones and computers and iPads are all pretty much redundant. So any of our modern history that's been recorded digitally would cease to exist, essentially. Books are the only way human civilization would survive if this was to actually happen. It also makes you wonder what would happen in a real post-apocalyptic event and what human history would actually survive. I mean, there's a reason our ancestors recorded everything on stone, because it doesn't degrade over time like paper. And it's amazing that some books are actually still available in the film. And it's a very good point the film does bring up, because books are rare. So it's only those hardcover bound books that have survived that long, because paper's susceptible to heat and moisture damage. It's also burns. So what would be left of humanity's history, especially the modern day where everything is online? If the grid goes down, if the power goes down, or the device is destroyed, or you can't access the internet because satellites, cables, whatever, you don't have the power to power the Wi-Fi modem to access the internet, you're more or less fucked. So what would happen to our modern knowledge? It's all stored online. It's all stored in the fucking cloud or on a hard drive if you can't access the hard drive through power. If the power network fails and goes down, then all of our history is lost unless it is recorded on pen and paper or print and paper in a leather-bound book. I've got leather-bound journals and notebooks. It's very thick recycled paper. Hopefully it'll survive long enough. So never underestimate the power of writing. I've even gone back to writing some of my episodes with pencil or pen on paper. I write all my movie reviews freehand. The bigger historical ones I obviously type because there's just too many words to write. I'd have arthritis by the end of the week. I do get a really cool feeling writing with a pencil on paper. It feels old worldy, but it feels like, I don't know, it feels like it's special, ancient. It means more because it's physically in front of you and you've actually written it. And I've got a notebook. I write these reviews down as well as other show notes. And it looks cool just flicking through it and seeing every single page with writing on it. And that's something I've always wanted to do. Write and journal since I was a kid, but you never know what to write, and I never got into it when I was younger. It's something I've only got into in the last 2 years. It's half the discipline of remembering to do it, what to write, what's relevant, what's not, but the more you learn, the more you realise it's whatever you want it to be. And it's a skill that is becoming lost, and this part of the film really does highlight that. What happens if humans lose the ability to write or to speak? It's pretty terrifying. That's essentially what happens to the humans in the film. They can't talk or communicate like they used to. Therefore, human history becomes lost. And if that happens in a realistic context, then you can change history, pervert history, or deny it. Because the records are so fragile. I'm watching the wrestling while I'm recording. It's fucking fantastic. I've always neglected wrestling. I never thought it was a real sport. I always thought it was just fake bullshit, but I've been watching it for the past couple of months and I'm fucking loving it. I'm watching the Becky Lynch take on the 4 gothic looking chicks, and that Valkyria wrestler has just come running into the ring to save her. Oh, now the blonde chick she just punched before is just throwing her through the ring. But back to it. It really does make you wonder how easy our own history would be lost if an apocalyptic event were to happen. It makes you appreciate how fragile recorded history actually is and how vulnerable it is when you put everything online, and all of our history/recording methods now are electronic based. If the power goes down, they disappear. Hard drives are fucking useless without a computer. Computer's useless if it doesn't have power. So it really highlighted the fragility of modern historical record keeping. It also makes you wonder, have we lost civilizations before this way due to lost historical records or poor record keeping? I'm a big supporter of Graham Hancock's beliefs. Was there a highly advanced civilization before us that, built the pyramids, whatever you want to call them, the Atlanteans? Did they exist thousands of years before Egypt and Sumeria? Did they encounter a global cataclysm that wiped them out? And the only reason we don't know about them is because there is no historical record of them left. And the survivors of this cataclysm more or less spread around the world and tried to re-civilize the world in the generations to come by passing on the knowledge of farming, building, agriculture, that type of thing. And that's the reason these ancient sites, like the Great Pyramid of Giza, are so hard to figure out, and why no one really knows for sure how they were made. Because it seems to be a huge recurring factor with ancient cultures is they had this mysterious building method. In Machu Picchu, the blocks look like they were cast out of concrete rather than cut. And how did they get the blocks from mines thousands of kilometers away up into the Andes? Who the fuck knows? I guarantee it wasn't through manpower and alpacas. So have we lost civilizations before? This part of the film does a very good job at highlighting that. When Raikou explains to Noah about the teachings of Caesar, he also points out how easy it is to pervert these teachings and how easy it is for an extremist mindset or an extremist leader to take over and just pretty much corrupt religion and belief for their own personal gain. And this is something that's all too familiar in the real world. Extremist groups that pervert religion for their own ends or their own means, or whatever their version of quote unquote that truth is. Taking a line from a holy book, they'll take a line from it and that becomes the core ethos of that perverted belief system. More or less all religions do this. There's always an extreme element to pretty much any religion or belief. And unfortunately, I think it's an element of religion that I don't think will ever go away. Because no two people can agree on anything. And there's always going to be some type of extremist view, especially when it comes to religion. Old Testament versus New Testament, eye for an eye, forgiveness, peace and love, or you've taken something from me, I'm taking something from you. Revenge is alright if it's in this eye for an eye context, and so on and so on. So just like how the film highlighted pretty much the flaws of human belief, and that it was something that is not just isolated to humans. Apes have repeated the same patterns that humans once did in their beliefs. They've perverted belief for their own gain, and you probably get my point by now. Riker also tells Noah that humans are called Nova, and Nova is the name of the mute girl from War of the Planet of the Apes who hangs out with the orangutan, which is a nice little Easter egg to the last trilogy. Roku is an adherer to the true word of Caesar, hence why he tolerates humans. He seeks to help as many humans as possible and likes to keep them around. At this point, this mysterious girl has been following Noah and Riku around. She steals a blanket earlier in the film and she's hanging around these two trying to scavenge food. She's a little mysterious and you kind of get this funny vibe about her. She's the one from the trailer, the one who plays Suri from The Witcher. That show's fucking shit. Roku and Noah are around a campfire. Nova comes out of the shadows closer to the group. They give her some scraps to eat and continue their journey in the morning. So the following morning, the trio set out to continue their adventure. They come across a herd of wild zebras, which is another cool element of this film. Noah's story is the classic hero story. He's on this mission. He's going to have trials he needs to face in order to be reunited with his tribe and save the day. So he starts to go off by himself. Nova and Riku are going to do their own thing. They're watching the zebras and see a bunch of wild humans come out of the undergrowth and start drinking water alongside the herd of zebras before they're hunted down by the bad apes. There's a lot of little throwbacks to other films. There's a cool roundup scene where the apes are hunting down the humans. They're looking for this mysterious human that can talk. It's very reminiscent of the original Planet of the Apes, the net chase. They're chasing humans down in the river. They're chucking nets over them and dragging them away. Nova runs into the long grass, which is very reminiscent of The Lost World. The gorilla and chimps are hunting her down. Noah's on the outskirts of the grass where she calls to him, where he comes and saves the day. But she also gives up that big secret, is that she can talk. And we find out her name is not Nova, it is in fact May. Once she reveals her big secret, a lot of questions are raised about May. Who is she? Where did she come from? Who is she working for? What tribe is she from? And what is her mission? As soon as you realise she can talk, you realise that she's not randomly following them for food. There's a deeper meaning for her following Noah and Riku, but we don't quite know what it is. And this film does a very good job of keeping the audience conflicted to certain characters, and it doesn't really take sides, and is actually very well made in that regard. Rather than do the classic kind of character progression, you're kind of left wondering right till the end about the intentions of certain characters. Our trio of interspecies heroes make their way to the coast to continue the search for Noah's tribe. and whatever it is that May is up to. So they come across this bridge. The bridge is an ambush. Our heroes are captured by the bad apes, by the gorilla from the grass chase. They're rounded up and brought to the coast. And this is where we get the intro to the big bad guy of the film, Proximo Caesar. He doesn't come into the film until relatively late. There's a lot of build-up around him. Not a lot of tension. So we're still left wondering, who is this bad guy? What's his intentions? Because we haven't seen him at all during the film. The Proximo is not quite what we expect. He announces himself to his colony of apes that are living in the wreck of an old oil tanker. He's turned the beachfront into his own fortress. They've dammed up part of an old dock or a old naval installation of some type, and there's a gigantic steel door not too far from the ocean. There's a very epic scene of the apes trying to open the steel door. Proximo wants whatever's inside. It's clear that it's some type of military installation, but who or what is on the inside is a mystery. May gets taken to see Proximo. Koa gets released and sent out into the workyard to work with the other apes. Proximo more or less has the other apes as slave labour to try to open this door. A little more backstory around Proximo probably would have been nice to fill in some of his motivations and intentions. Proximo Caesar is played by Kevin Durant, who does a fantastic job. Noah is cast out into the workyard to join the other apes, where he is reunited with his tribe. The Eagle tribe have all been taken there. He is reunited with his mother and the two apes from the start of the film. May is taken to see Proximo, where we're introduced to William H. Macy, which I actually didn't know was even in the film. He plays Trevathan. His character is kind of a devil's advocate. He can speak and read, much like May, which makes humans like these two important to Proximo. Proximo wants to learn as much about human history as he can. Trevathan's been reading Roman epics to him, hence the name Proximo. He likes Roman history. Trevathan is pretty much a teacher to Proximo. He's teaching him language, stories, history. He's making him smarter. Humans like May and Trevathan are worth a lot to him because he can use them as teachers for himself and for the other apes, but mainly for himself. He wants to boost his knowledge. And after the grand intro to Proximo, you start to question his character because he's not really a bad guy per se. He has some brutal methods, but he's not really cruel or overly tyrannical. He just wants what's inside the steel doors left over by people, and he'll do anything to get it. None of the apes are chained or anything. They're being probably held against their will. There's guards and stuff. He has his security force, but they're fed, and he isn't too brutal towards them or the humans, unlike the original Planet of the Apes, which got pretty brutal and pretty dark. So Proximo isn't really the biggest threat in this film. It's also around here that May's intentions start to become a little clearer. She was trying to find this mysterious steel door. She knows what's inside it and disagrees with Proximo and Trevathan. Trevathan accepts that humans have had their day, humanity is done and dusted, and the world belongs to the apes, and he should be so lucky to find himself at their mercy. It's also cool because these new apes will hopefully play into future sequels, having different tribes of apes and potentially even humans. Things could get very dramatic. It's helping to build the world and set up the sequels. Our heroes are taken to Proximo, who explains his overall grand plan. If he can get inside the doors, he believes he'll find the means of instant ape evolution. He realizes he's mortal, and this goes back to some other Roman stories of the emperors and that Stoic philosophy. He knows he's mortal, and it will take several lifetimes for him to naturally progress his knowledge base by learning through Trevathan and the resources left behind. So he believes whatever is in the vault will instantly evolve ape kind, well, his apes and himself, and give him the tools and the power to take over a or I'm kind of guessing they're even more areas of land or territory. He may also be wanting whatever's in there to either eradicate the leftover humans or even opposing tribes. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of left up in the air because he's not really the bad guy. And now May's character is kind of emerging as she's hiding something. She's not what she seems. She's not who she says she is. Noah's kind of stuck in the middle between these two. And this movie does something very original because this type of confliction, especially in three main characters, doesn't get seen a lot in your typical sci-fi blockbuster. And I was not expecting it in a Planet of the Apes film. You'd maybe expect it in Star Wars or something like that, but not quite a film like this. Not a post-apocalyptic, essentially a chase survival movie set in the future with apes. Then it just takes this completely different turn and it makes you question the main character's motivations right till the end. It also shows us where this trilogy might be going. Because so far the film has pretty much kept a constant pace all the way through. There's been a few slower scenes scattered throughout the film, but it's balanced out with a mix of action and chase scenes and building the story and the characters. Unfortunately, it's around the beach part that the film starts to slow down a little bit, which may or may not have been intentional, because on the one hand, yeah, the film does slow down a little bit, but it gives you time to kind of process everything that's happening, because all these old characters from the start are back, the plan's been unveiled, the bad guy's been revealed, and we're starting to question some of the characters and their intentions. There's a degree of figuring out who's who and what's what about this point, so it's not necessarily a bad thing that it does slow down. Noah reunites with Suna, Anya, and his mother. Noah comes up with a plan to get into the shelter along with May, and this leads into the very final act of the film. May finds herself with another group of apes. They hatch a plan to get into the shelter. They climb the cliffs surrounding the doors and find an old ventilation hatch and make their way inside. This scene's a little reminiscent of The Lost World, where the trailers go over the cliff and they're climbing up the cliff face over the beach at night. There's a lot of Lost World references in this film. I'm wondering if Wes Ball was a big fan of The Lost World. Our heroes make their way inside the shelter, where it's revealed that it's an old military installation full of tanks, weapons, computers. It's got schools, books, and supplies. May knows what it was used for the entire time. It was more or less a fallout shelter for elites and those important enough to survive the ape apocalypse. She mentions that there was many of these around the country where all the politicians and elites and high-ups went to shelter. Those shelters do exist. There's that one in Colorado with like the 20-foot thick steel door, Cheyenne Mountain. It's got enough food and stuff in it for like 2 years and it could hold 2,500 people. Makes you wonder, would you really want to be trapped down there for 2 years? And what happens when the food runs out? Because it's going to run out. It doesn't have a finite amount of food or water. It might get you 5 years of extra long, safe existence, but eventually it's going to run out and you're going to have to open the door. Now, is it better to just hope you perish in the apocalypse in the first few minutes, or you somehow survive and ride it out and just adjust to life in this post-apocalyptic dystopian nightmare? Because imagine being stuck in a fallout shelter and coming to the surface would probably be a very sharp learning curve, unless if you're evolved naturally from day one, I guess you become more accustomed to the dangers the world now possesses, as opposed to learning everything from scratch. But I'm kind of rambling about nothing. Back to it. May's mission was pretty simple. She was sent to the shelter to retrieve the satellite communications hard drive. The power still works surprisingly, and she finds it in one of the old mainframe computers. She takes it, they go to open the door. This part of the plan seems a bit rushed, because if you're opening the door, obviously Proximo is going to know that she's doing it, and the whole beach is full of apes, and this part of the story isn't that well thought out, because A majority of the apes being used for slave labor are from the Eagle tribe, which obviously Noah is from and his mother is a part of. So they're probably not going to willingly join Proximo, but it's a bit left up in the air at this point. You don't really know what side the apes are going to pick. Unlike Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, where Cobra has his troops that are loyal to him and Caesar and his son have theirs. So the door's open, it's revealed to be a trap. Proximo comes in and wants what's inside. They've never seen tanks and stuff like that before. And as I was saying about Proximo not really being a bad guy, not really being a good guy, I think he probably needed to be a bit more of a bad guy at this point because there's not a lot of tension or danger. He's got Suna hostage and he wants Noah to reveal May's plan. May isn't really threatened either. She's kind of standing in the corner by herself. Suna or his mother's been held at knife point by one of the ape henchmen, but there's not a lot of tension or drama here. You don't really think that Proximo's going to have them killed. There's not a lot of real danger or threat here. If he was more of a traditional bad guy, it would probably be more believable that they're actually in harm's way. And May also kind of stabs Noah in the back a bit. Her deception is revealed, but it's not very well explained. We're still at this point wondering who she is, who is she working for, how does she know so much about the base, why was she after the hard drive, and just what's her motivation, why did she come all this way to try and get it. And obviously this is probably going to be revealed towards the end, but it's at this point the audience is kind of left wondering what everyone's motivations are. Who are you working for? Who is this person? Why do you want to get in here so badly? What's happening? What's going on? The audience is even more conflicted than 20 minutes ago. All these characters and story arcs are kind of colliding in this one hangar scene. May is more or less looking like a bad guy and Noah is still caught in the middle. She steals a gun, which is probably no surprise, shoots the ape, runs out the door. She blows up the dam and saves Noah and co. And runs up the concrete staircase of the old dock to safety, which I thought was a bit of a dick move. She blows up the dam and kills hundreds of apes and potentially could have killed her friends she's been travelling with until this point, because she more or less used the apes to help her climb up the cliff face, get into the bunker and then open the door. She couldn't do it because she didn't have any rope, so she needed to piggyback on Noah. There's a line from before where Roku's talking about humans not having enough appendages if they fall off of something, saying how apes can use their feet as hands, which is a little hint at what's to come. So she kind of leaves Noah and his tribe scratching their heads at, oh, you just kind of used us for your own gain and now you're fucked off to higher ground and we're getting wet and getting washed into the shelter where they're pretty much going to drown because the whole thing's filling up with water and there's only one way out of it. It's also at this point where Proximo, not really being the bad guy, kind of comes back around because May and her deception are revealed. And now you're kind of left wondering who really is the bad guy, because Proximo's not really in the film enough until this point to make a huge impact. Yes, he's a cool character and he does play his part well, but ultimately he's not really the antagonist, and May's not really the antagonist either. They're kind of these neutral, not good guys, not bad guys, kind of sitting on the fence a bit. And Noah's kind of caught up in the middle of all this confusion, wondering who he should trust and why. And more or less he has to pick the lesser of two evils to try to follow. He obviously picks May. Proximo wasn't really a bad guy, so his motivation and obsession for finding what was in the base kind of falls short. So it seems a little weird that he's so hell-bent on getting the stuff that's inside the bunker, even though he doesn't really know what any of it is or how it works. When she shoots one of his henchmen, he is blown away by the fact that she pointed this thing and pulled the trigger and killed the henchman. Proximo makes a comment along the lines of, wow, what is this thing? Imagine if my army had these things you could point and shoot, and was there any more of them in the shelter? He's not so concerned about the life of his henchmen. So it's like he doesn't know what a gun is, but he knows that he wants one. But at the same time, he's willing to sacrifice his entire workforce and his army in order to get access to human relics and artifacts that may or may not evolve his army into a better fighting force, or give him more knowledge, whatever it is that his ultimate endgame is. And that's the problem, is don't really know what his ultimate endgame is. So he's not really an effective villain. He's not really a villain at all. Now, if he knew there was human artifacts that could destroy his enemies, that would be a different story. He would have been a much more nefarious character, and you could justify May's deception for trying to stop him. But at this point, May knows what's inside. She uses the apes to get inside to get it. We still don't know what our plan is. She blows up the dam and kills a bunch of innocent apes being held against their will to open the gate to get the things that Proximo wants inside, which he doesn't quite know what they are, what they do, or even what their purpose is, so he can get instant evolution. It does get a bit convoluted and conflicted around this point. It's still a great movie. There's just a lot of questions being raised and not a lot of them are being answered, and this is pretty late into the film. You don't know what side to pick. You obviously align yourself with Noah, because he's in the middle with the audience, wondering what the fuck's going on and who everyone really is and what their intentions really are. And as I said, if there was a clearer objective from Proximo, if he wanted a whole bunch of tanks and guns so he could destroy the next village, or he could create a bigger army for himself so he could take on a strong human population that can still talk somewhere, or a super tribe of apes, that would be a different story. Because he's just as responsible for all the ape deaths as May is. So the shelter is filling up with water. There's a pretty cool fight against the head security gorilla. This guy is more or less the main villain of the film. He's the big gorilla henchman that just keeps popping up. And he has a fight with Noah, who gets the living shit kicked out of him during this film. He obviously can't fight the gorilla, but he does manage to outsmart him. So the apes get told to climb up the inside of the shelter and follow the passageways to the ventilation shaft, where Noah is reunited with his tribe. Then comes the final showdown with Proximo. And it's about here that Proximo does become the bad guy that he probably should have been about an hour before. He's willing to kill Noah in front of everyone to prove he is the dominant leader, and you're going to do exactly what he says. He's the boss, and that's that. So these two have a bit of a scrap. Noah saves the day and returns the tribe back to their home, where he rebuilds the tree houses and the aviaries. May returns to the village, where she is confronted by Noah. They have a pretty intense discussion. She explains herself and why she did what she did. I don't think Noah quite trusts her, which I think is going to be setting up future plot points for sequels. Noah, unlike Caesar, doesn't know the mercy of humans or didn't grow up with humans. So I think Noah going forward is going to be very skeptical of humans, especially ones that can talk, given that he has seen her use him and other apes to get into the shelter to get what she wants, then more or less leave them high and dry when the plan goes sideways, leaving him and his tribe to drown, despite his objections earlier in the film. So May's intentions are becoming clearer. The clans returned, the eagles return, rebuilding continues. Unfortunately for May, her intentions are hard to grasp, because it was the end of the film and I'm still pretty conflicted about May. You don't really know what to make of her. I don't even really know if I liked her character, but you kind of left having to pick a side. I mean, I kind of sympathise more with Noah and the Eagle tribe. Proximo, he was okay, but he was a bit of a prick, and May is hiding something. It makes discerning a hero and villain in this film very hard. I mean, Noah is ultimately the hero, but there's a lot of characters who are really just on the fence. They're not really good or bad, which was very original. I do respect the film for doing this. It's not a negative point by any means. It actually made the story really original and interesting, and I wish more films would do this. It had this layer of intricacy which I wasn't expecting from a Planet of the Apes film. Not to say that it's not intricate, but the level of characterization was a bit surprising, because Noah more or less represents the viewpoint of the audience. He's stuck in the middle of this crazy survival chase film at the start of the movie, then it becomes this survival espionage film, and now we're at the end of it. He is questioning May and her intentions and pretty much all of what has happened so far. And ultimately it leads him down a path where he can't trust either humans or apes. And I'm pretty sure that's going to get picked up on in future installments, which is very different from the previous Planet of the Apes films, where Caesar was a very clear good guy. He was very morally unshakable, and you had the bad apes and the breakaway groups. Caesar always worked with humans, or at least try to make things work, where Noah's going to be very conflicted and very hesitant to trust another human going forward, which should be pretty interesting. This is also a very big spoiler, so if you don't want to have even more of the film spoiled, stop listening. May's intentions get revealed in the final moments of the film. She arrives at a satellite installation that's in disrepair. She's met by a human in a biosuit, to whom she gives the satellite communications hard drive to. They plug it in, get the satellites working, and re-establish communications with human survivor groups scattered around the country, which I also think is going to play into future films. There's more than likely going to be some type of human resistance movement element to the sequels, much like Terminator. Now humans have got communication, they can start coordinating and fighting back against the apes, which will be interesting. And once again, Noah's going to be right in the middle of this fight. I think, I could be completely wrong, but to me that's kind of where this series is going. A war between humans and apes. Hey, if it's good and they pull it off, excellent, should be good. But the big problem is we still really don't know who May was working for. Who told her to get the hard drive, who told her where to find it, who told her how to get into the fallout shelter, who sent her out into the wilderness to find friendly apes in order to help in her quest. Because May more or less comes across the Eagle Tribe and Noah kind of by chance. She wants to steal a blanket to stay warm, and then she wants to get food in order to survive. But it's nearly like, when you look at it like that, it's nearly like she is trying to bait Noah into following her into some bigger plan. That's cut down later on in the film, where she meets Proximo and she's surprised to come across Trevathan, another human that can talk, where I think he explains that there's lots of us out there, or there is a few of them scattered out there, and there could be worse something to apes. But where May, you never really find out her intentions or who she's working for, because it seems way too coincidental that she just randomly comes across Noah. Yes, Noah ends up helping her and saving her a few times, and it creates that relationship between humans and apes. But ultimately, Noah's left more confused at the end of the film than he was before she enters his story. All the stories about humans and not going near them because they're feral and can be dangerous are kind of proven true, because to him, they can't really be trusted, especially the ones that talk. So it was just a happy chance that she finds a group of apes that could accompany her to the coast where this fallout shelter was, and that just happened to be the base of Proximo Caesar, a powerful warlord, trying to get into the shelter to get a bunch of weapons and tanks that he didn't know were even there, so he can use them for his own gain. But I guess it comes back to the exploiting religion and belief for personal gain. I might have to see it again to work out May's intentions, because May knows the satellite communications hard drive is in the base, but she didn't know it was controlled by Proximo, and you don't really know who she's working for, or whether she just came across it and thought that the resistance could use it, because the woman that receives it definitely seems to know what it is, and to a point looks like they were actually expecting it. So she's obviously sent there by someone. Did she have the location to multiple survival shelters that all had the same communications relay system? And she could go to any of them and try to salvage whatever she could and bring it back to this group of humans that can talk, that have been unaffected by the virus. That seems like the most logical explanation for her intentions. Some group, or the tribe who she came from, whatever, gave her the mission, but it seems pretty dangerous because she doesn't have any weapons really until she finds them. But anyway, enough about that. I think I could ramble on all day about the intentions of May. The one last thing I will say about her is, how did her clothes survive? Because they're like pretty much rotting off, and she still has pants. They look like jeans, where everyone else is wearing tattered cloths and rudimentary leather garments made out of animal hides like a caveman would. So all in all, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes was a great film. I have more questions than answers, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It was a great way to... I'm not sure if you'd say it was a reboot, because the last one that came out wasn't really that long ago, and it's not really rebooting that old story. I'll call it a revival. It was a great way to revive the Planet of the Apes franchise and kickstart a new trilogy. I only hope I don't have to wait too long for the next installment, 2 or 3 years at the most, I'm hoping. It was a really good first installment of what could potentially be a really great trilogy. It sets up a whole new Planet of the Apes universe. It's got these new characters, it's got new locations and new tribes, and it's expanded the world. All in all, I'd give it 4 stars out of 5. It was highly enjoyable, great visuals, good story. It actually had some characterization, and it wasn't all about visual effects and action. It did get a little slow sometimes, and it was conflicting and a bit contradictory sometimes, but it was a very enjoyable film. And it's a perfect example of how modern technology and visual effects can be used to aid in the storytelling process and not just be used in action scenes or superhero films. The visual effects were fucking incredible. It's some of the best visual effects I think I've ever seen in a film. They were nearly flawless, and it avoids the uncanny valley. Nothing stands out too badly as unrealistic or not believable or sends up those red flags. And I think they do this by not making the apes look like real 100% National Geographic apes. The face looks slightly human, and I think that was done intentionally to throw off the uncanny valley. The eyes especially don't look very ape-like, they look like human eyes. All the faces of the apes look different. They look like the actors that portrayed them, much like Avatar. All the Na'vi look like the actors doing the motion capture. Because the last Planet of the Apes came out in 2017, and that had some pretty impressive special effects. And this takes it to the next level. The only scenes where it was kind of noticeable that it was visual effects were some of the action scenes where there was multiple groups of apes, but the fur and the water looks so realistic. Even the way the chimps move from side to side and the gorilla lumbering around, even though they're walking more upright than real life apes, it gives the apes this realistic nature, the way they walk. And there's a lot of slower scenes in this, so you can really appreciate the visual effects and how realistic this movie is. You don't have masses of blurry action scenes where you can't see anything. The visual effects are definitely on another level. And even the slight flaws with the visual effects are no big deal. It doesn't hinder the story or anything, it's just a minor discrepancy. It's also kind of scary to think that the last one came out 2017, and the massive improvement in under 10 years or so from that film to this one. So you can only imagine what special effects in another 5 to 7 years are going to look like. They'll be probably unrecognizable from reality. That's kind of scary, because then that goes into the whole AI, deep fake, everyone can be impersonated debate, which is a bit frightening, which is a topic for another day. I think the visual effects in it were even better than Avatar 2. The motion capture was pretty much faultless as well. Just everything moves so naturally and realistically. But it shouldn't be that much of a surprise, because the Planet of the Apes films have always set the bar for the next level of visual effects, going right back to Rise of the Planet of the Apes in 2011. That was definitely a step up for visual effects. Obviously, Avatar came out in 2009 and that set the bar pretty high. And Planet of the Apes kind of built on that and probably took it to the next level. So all in all, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a great film. It drops you straight into the action. It keeps the pacing up right throughout the film. Even though there are some slower, more quiet parts in it, I didn't mind that. I don't need an action scene every 40 seconds. You can actually build stories in blockbusters and they can still be good. So after the attack on the village, it becomes more or less a survival chase film with a bigger overarching story and narrative. New characters come into it. The world expands. It does tend to slow down a bit once it gets to the coast. However, this isn't a huge issue. I think it was deliberately done to conflict the audience a bit more. You have a bit more time to break things down and think about them. There's not a huge amount of action in this part of the film, but it was still enjoyable. The set design and the look of the world is great. Everything is rusty and decaying and overgrown. You're getting the last remnants of the human world before it is being replaced and rebuilt by the ape world. I loved the design of the city and Proximo's fortress, the rusty ships, the old overgrown buildings, the decaying airport, the rusty planes, the old rusty ships and bridges. I love the post-apocalyptic design. I also liked the design of the ape armor and the wooden masks Proximo's henchmen wear. It fits with the original Planet of the Apes. The original, they had those like leather vests. Pretty sure the gorillas and stuff wore armor, and the horses, they had helmets. The Tim Burton one, they had a lot of elaborate helmet and armor designs. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is not quite as over the top. It's more rudimentary, but you can definitely see the evolution of the design. It fits with the last trilogy, but also definitely fits into the originals as well. I like the gorilla's armor with the chest piece. That was very reminiscent of some of the original Planet of the Apes. I think the reason why they clothed the apes in the original, besides making it obvious that they had become more or less the humans, was to cover up the zippers in the back of the costumes. The costumes had big, obvious zippers, and the vests hid that, which is kind of funny. But the apes in the armor definitely looks fucking scary. It looks cool. There's another element of the movie I liked. So all in all, a great film, a great way to restart a franchise and to start off a new trilogy. I wouldn't mind seeing it again and absorbing all the stuff I missed the first time. That brings us to the end of the review part of the show. Let's move into some post-apocalyptic scenario fun.
Welcome to the Dead Podcast. I'm your host, Desi, and on this podcast, I discuss all things spooky and weird, from ghosts, demons, religion, to folklore, urban legends, true crime, and all things paranormal, with some horror movie reviews sprinkled in. So join me on this spooky ride.
So what is your ideal nightmarish post-apocalyptic scenario? Or what post-apocalyptic scenario would you find the worst or hardest to survive in? Why don't you let me know what your thoughts are? What post-apocalyptic scenario would you prefer? What would be hardest to survive? Or what would be the worst? Let me know in the comments on this episode's Instagram post. If you're hearing the episode, the post should be up. So let me know what you think in the comments. I'd be interested to find out what everyone's favourite or worst apocalyptic scenario might be. Mine, I don't know, I got a few. I think the most likely to happen would probably be the Mad Max-esque scenario or Fallout. A nuclear Armageddon seems pretty relevant and on the cards at the moment, given what's happening with Russia and Ukraine and Genocidal Joe baiting both dogs in the fight. That's probably the most likely to happen. It's also probably the scariest just because of the radiation, and unless everyone's walking around with a Geiger counter, it'd be very hard to pick up on what's poison and what's not. It'd destroy the land, the food supply, the water, and make things pretty fucking difficult to survive. Everything would be polluted. Rain, air particles would have the dust from the fallout, it wouldn't be that nice. It also have a dramatic effect on the entire world. There wouldn't be very many places that would be unaffected from a full-scale nuclear war. It'd be pretty fucking terrifying. Not to mention rad roaches and super mutants eating dog food and stale bags of chips out of roadside gas stations and dilapidated supermarkets doesn't sound like a lot of fun. That would probably be the worst. That's probably my worst / scariest apocalyptic scenario. I think the classic one, the zombie one, would probably be the most fun. As I said on Pick My Apocalypse, it'd be fun for about 2 weeks before you just got bored of it or resources start to run out. But the worst part in that would probably be like The Walking Dead, where you have to be more concerned about humans you encountered rather than the zombies. I generally think people in apocalyptic scenarios would probably be the scariest thing to encounter, just because you don't know what people's intentions are, or if they're a psychotic cannibal, a raider, karma crazy war boy, or some irradiated freak show that just wants to steal your shit and leave you dead in a ditch somewhere. Maybe that was the whole point of making May's intentions very conflicted and Proximo's, was to create that confusion that a lot of post-apocalyptic media doesn't really convey that well. Maybe that was the whole point, is making it confusing because you're living in a very confusing world. The zombie one would probably be the easiest to survive, I'd think, as long as your weapon supply doesn't run out, because like the zombies don't exactly run. Well, the ones I'm thinking of, Walking Dead zombies, not quite Dawn of the Dead zombies, but if you were a rotting corpse, you'd think that the weather and stuff would do a lot of damage to the decaying corpse, because after all, you can only run because of tendons and muscles, and if you're decaying, you're probably not going to be moving too fast. You'd also probably freeze in the winter and rot quicker in the summer, or get picked up by birds of prey and scavengers. So I think after a couple of years, there probably wouldn't be a hell of a lot of zombies left. Supplies would be tough, but as long as you had a decently fortified area, you could grow stuff, and not everybody turns out like the governor or Negan, it may not be that bad. You probably wouldn't be able to go far after the fuel runs out, and that would lead into the Mad Max scenario, is where fuel becomes the most valuable commodity, because only those that can move around can really survive. And that's the other problem with the Mad Max scenario, is everyone's fucking batshit crazy and only the mad survive. So everybody is potentially a psychotic cannibal looking for supplies or a food source. The thing I do like about Mad Max is how industrialized people become in the apocalypse. They're refining fuel still, making bullets, growing stuff, controlling resources. That seems very likely as well. I think if the world did have a cataclysmic nuclear apocalypse, that's what the survivors would probably be like. Only the crazy would survive. Only the most brutal would survive. Because you'd have to be. It'd be an insane world to live in. Another thing that's appealing about that film is a lot of post-apocalyptic films, the vehicles are the first thing to go, and so are the fuel sources, where Mad Max is the opposite. The whole universe is built around the cars, the trucks, the insane vehicles, and it's all about getting supplies, refining fuel, making bullets, the green place, the water, and just encountering a bunch of fucking lunatics on an outback road. That's one of the most unique features of Mad Max, and all the different insane tribes that spring up in the post-apocalyptic world, and the hierarchy of lunatics and drifters like Max that get caught up in the middle of intertribal warfare. It's one of the most interesting things about Mad Max, and obviously the completely over-the-top chases and action scenes and unique characters. That is probably the most likely to happen, especially in a country the size of Australia, because you can't exactly walk to other states like you can in The Walking Dead, where it seems like they spent the last 10 years just walking through Georgia to get to DC. I suppose parts of America and Canada are also like that. Europe would probably be alright. You could probably walk through Europe in a few weeks. especially states like Texas, where it's like, was it the equal distance to get from one corner of Texas to the other as it is to get from Texas to the Canadian border. There's parts of Canada that are like, the next town is like a 12-hour drive. Where I live in Australia, the next city is an 8-9 hour drive. So Australia, like Canada and the US, you have to have a vehicle to get around, especially to cover those distances. So in a post-apocalyptic scenario, I think vehicles would be one of the most important aspects, that and securing a long-term fuel source. You couldn't make it to the next city or town in Australia without some type of transport, especially if you get out to the desert. If you don't have a vehicle and you break down, you are fucked, with a capital F. Especially if you were living in Perth and you had to get to Sydney. That is a 3,929.8 kilometre trip. It'd take you 42 hours to drive it, or a 4-hour and 15-minute flight. So you're talking about a massive expanse of land, and there's no way you could get around without a fucking car. You could walk or cycle or ride a horse, but you're probably not going to get that far, and you're not going to get very far in summer. It's too fucking hot and it's too long. So I definitely get Mad Max and the reliance on vehicles, because it'd be a necessity, and I'm pretty sure in a post-apocalyptic scenario in Australia, that's probably how things are going to turn out. The Mad would rise to the top. Rise of the Machines and a Terminator-esque apocalyptic scenario would also be terrifying, knowing that there's a smart artificial intelligence out there that has an army of semi-indestructible killbots programmed to hunt humans. That wouldn't be very fun, mainly because of the technological aspect. You'd be fighting an enemy smarter and more well equipped than you. You'd have to have access to technology to try to fight that battle. You'd need guns, you'd need explosives, lasers, heavy vehicles. It wouldn't be that much fun. That's also a ever increasingly likely scenario. If artificial intelligence keeps going the way it does and it's not restricted, it's very likely that it will become smarter than the people that created it. I was listening to Russell Brand the other day, and he was talking about a factory in China with robot workers that were indiscernible from the human workers. I haven't seen the robots he was talking about, but if that's true, that's pretty frightening. Who knows what some of these countries have and would implement, especially on their own people. That's the thing, robotics it's a bit slower than artificial intelligence, but it's one of those areas that is growing, and its potential to do good things is great, but the potential for a catastrophe is equally as great. Especially some of those DARPA machines, those things are fucking creepy. Any type of machine or robotics or artificial intelligence the military uses is probably not good. It's probably not in the best interests of humanity. Makes you wonder about the psyche of people who invent some of this stuff. I mean, yeah, look, I'd love to have like The Creator, that movie, a scenario where you could have like a robot follow you around. I mean, I'd love to have a helper robot, like an iRobot situation, doing remedial tasks and household chores. It'd make my job easier. I could have it edit all my episodes. I wouldn't have to do it. I could focus on writing and recording. But you can't really get one thing and not the other. Once again, the propensity for something catastrophic to happen with helper robots probably outweighs the risk of having one. Unless it's like a Star Wars C-3PO, R2-D2 type robot, that'd be a different story, but that's probably not likely to happen this century. I think robotics lacks a little bit. It's always behind the computer revolution, just a bit. There hasn't been any, well, not to my knowledge anyway, any massive leaps in robotic technology in the last 5 years. I know some of those machines are getting more realistic looking, but I haven't seen anything that has been like a T-800 level terrifying yet. But who knows, early days. One of the big issues with having a robot helper in a machine revolution would be trust. How can you trust the software and the programming? And it'd always be in the back of your mind that it might just turn on you and bite you, and that something is going to go wrong. Yeah, I'm not sure I could ever fully trust a machine. One of the most terrifying scenarios would be Planet of the Apes, and I'm not just saying that because I just saw the new film. You think of what it would be like being a human where apes rule. It would be fucking terrifying. Apes are stronger, than humans by a large degree. You couldn't fight them unless you had guns and a supply of ammo, but once that ammunition and those guns dry up, you're left to fight them with clubs, swords, spears, arrows. You wouldn't want to get close to a chimpanzee or a gorilla, not one from Planet of the Apes. That would be fucking terrifying. Imagine trying to fight a silverback gorilla charging at you. Oh. I mean, no one really knows how strong a gorilla is. There's lots of YouTube videos of them jumping at the plexiglass in zoos and cracking it and not realizing how powerful they are. If it was just orangutans, maybe. Orangutans seem a bit more level-headed than chimps. Gorillas are frightening in their own right just because of their size, but they're not vicious or as psychotic as chimps. But you wouldn't want to piss off a silverback. I read a report once. I'm not sure how true it is. I could never actually find it again. I've never been able to find much definitive proof about it, about how strong chimps and gorillas actually are. The report said they could potentially, push well over like 2 tons with their legs, maybe even do like a 600, 800 kilo bench press and just give up when they got bored. I'm not sure how true it is. No one's ever really 100% tested the strength of a chimp or a gorilla. Rough estimates is I think a chimp is like 2 or 3 times as strong as a human. If they could rip your arm off with their bare hands, stands to reason that they're probably pretty strong. Imagine being a wasteland survivor. You've just spent weeks humping it on the road, starving, drinking pond water, eating whatever berries you could find and hoping you don't break out in a rash and die scratching yourself to death. Imagine coming off of a 3-week trek out in the wild, coming across a nice wooded area, plenty of resources and shelter. You think, oh yeah, this is great. Might be able to find something to eat. It should rain a bit more here. We'll be able to collect water. And then being hunted by a pack of cannibalistic chimps. It wouldn't be very fun. Like the opening scene of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is fucking terrifying. Imagine if that was you with a deer and Caesar and the hunting party were up in the trees hunting you and your loved ones and other humans. That'd be fucking terrifying. You wouldn't be able to outrun them. You're not stronger than them. So there's very little you could do to fight back. Unless you had an AK or a rocket launcher or some type of weapon. But even then, things are fucking strong and they're agile, they can climb. Like I always say, you don't want to fuck with anything that can support its own body weight, swing around on a tree branch and jerk off at the same time. That is a fight you're not going to win, and I personally wouldn't want to come face to face with a chimp in the wild, because those things are fucking terrifying. They're too much like humans. They inhibit all the worst traits of humanity. You look at when they go nuts. I saw this documentary where 2 male chimps who are part of this tribe, they just went nuts one day and brutally murdered all the other chimps. They had a huge territory too, so it wasn't territory motivated. They had enough space, they had enough food. I'm not sure if they were the dominant chimps, the dominant male chimps, or they were a subordinate male chimp. But these 2 chimps just teamed up and brutally murdered all the chimps. They killed the babies, they beat the mother chimp to death, they killed the elderly, they killed all of the other ones. They were mass murdering freaks. They're running through the forest with their fucking fur puffed up, acting insane. They massacred I think it was 25 chimps, and then they moved on and joined another tribe for no apparent reason. They'll probably do the same thing there. Gorilla society and hierarchy is a bit different. So is orangutan. They're a bit more mild, a bit more family and socially orientated. Chimps are as well, but you hear those horrific stories of just chimps just going fucking nuts. Even in captivity. I went to a zoo where I am, and I was watching the chimps, and one of the keepers said, if you can see a chimp with blood all over it, that's because they got into a fight last night. The 2 subordinate males went and teamed up and attacked the dominant male. They were biting his shoulder. He had big cuts on him, and they can't obviously get in there to treat the wounds. He belted one of them, and they had to separate these 2 chimps because they were just bad news. And the older male chimp kicked the shit out of the other 2. They had bites and scratches all over them, and then they started biting the females, and same thing, they had these bloody marks all over them. I was sitting by the window watching this small chimp. I'm a considerable amount bigger than this chimp. I was sitting there watching it, having this magical moment. It had its hand on the glass, and I was touching the glass. It was touching the glass. I put my hand there. It put its hand there. And after about 5 minutes or so, it just got sick of me, and it whacked the bulletproof glass. And I was standing there, and I could feel the force going through my body. You could feel the whack from the flat open palm slap he gave the glass, and I was like, oh fuck, that is a lot of power. You can only imagine what that would have been like if that glass wasn't there. I would have gone flying across the fucking enclosure. Truly frightening. And with a gorilla, that's magnified probably by another 3 times on top of that. Well, a gorilla would be probably 6 to 10 times stronger than a human. That scene from Rise of the Planet of the Apes where the gorilla just lifts up the car with one hand, I could believe that a gorilla could do that. But chimps, they're fucking terrifying. They also attack all the vulnerable spots, and they seem to know the vulnerable spots with humans. When they attack chimps, they always go for the eyes, throat, balls, or bite fingers off. They attack any vulnerable part sticking out. Joe Rogan's always talking about psycho chimps. Once again, 2 subordinate male chimps attacked the older dominant one. They bit and attacked him. They ripped an ear off. They gouged an eye out, bit his nuts off, and bit fingers off, and it ended up biting him to death. So beating it to death wasn't good enough. They had to, bite fingers and balls off just to prove the point. So a Planet of the Apes scenario probably wouldn't be that pleasant to live through. Not unless it's like the movie and the apes are more evolved. They can talk and you can have a open dialogue with them and explain to them that you're not an enemy and you want to be friends and sit around the campfire and sing Kumbaya. If it's a Planet of the Apes scenario, yeah, maybe that'd be alright if you could talk and communicate and there was a understanding between apes, the ones that believe in the teachings of Caesar, that humans and apes should coexist side by side and let all the past experimentation on apes and keeping them in zoos, let all that stay in the past and let's go towards the future. That might be okay, but if you're talking about realistic real-world chimps, if you had a group or a species of semi-evolved wild chimps that ended up becoming the dominant species on the planet and took over, that would be fucking frightening. Not to mention gorillas, orangutans, baboons, those things look fucking nuts as it is. Imagine having the entire world overrun by them. Oh, it'd be fucking frightening. Because chimps don't fuck around. That would be one of the most terrifying experiences, being hunted through a forest by a pack of chimps, because it's not going to end well for you. They can climb, you can't. They're stronger and they can run faster. Even if humans are smarter, even if human beings were not affected by a virus, resources are eventually going to run out. But I suppose that's the big difference, is that we're smarter, therefore we reign supreme. I think that was a smart decision in Rise of the Planet of the Apes, making the reason for ape evolution be a human experimental drug that made apes smart and made humans sick and lose the ability of speech and de-evolve them to some degree. Not to mention Bigfoot. If Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the Yowie, Yetis are real, you wouldn't want to go into the woods anyway, because wouldn't that mean they'd have to align themselves with apes, not humans? That would be even scarier. Woods and forests are scary enough without Bigfoots or monsters or apes. If you had a Planet of the Apes with a Planet of the Sasquatches, Planet of the Bigfoot, that would be fucking terrifying as well. Because Bigfoots are bigger and stronger again compared to a gorilla. So yeah, that's a situation that would be utterly fucking terrifying. Planet of the Bigfoots does have a interesting ring to it. And look, I mean, it was only under 100 years ago that gorillas were discovered, so maybe Bigfoot is out there just waiting to be found. I am a big believer in Sasquatch and the Yowie. I've always thought that could be a possibility. Ever since I was young, it made sense to me. Why not? There's so many mysterious things that are yet to be discovered, so why can't a species of ape man or ape or alien, mysterious biological creature be real. Or whatever path you want to go down, whether it be the flesh and blood creature or something else, it could exist. New things get found every day, but I guess that's half the fun of looking into Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster and UFOs is the mystery. The mystery is one of the appeals. The mystery is alluring and it keeps you coming back because it isn't definitive. And I think I've rambled on about nothing for long enough.
G'day. Don't skip. Let me interrupt the podcast that you're currently listening to with some blatant self-promotion. What do you get when you mix two Aussie mates, a splash of booze, well, more than a splash, and some microphones? You get Cheers Big Ears, hosted by myself, the Chad, and my mate, Matt, and sometimes, but more often than not now, my missus, Bobby. It's a podcast of adult beverages and not-so-adult conversation. It's not serious, far from it. Well, except for that one episode, but that was just that one. We're available wherever you get your podcast fix. Cheers, Big Ears.
And with that brings us to the end of the show. A big thank you to everyone who listened to the end. If you'd like to support the Truth Tank, there's a couple of things you can do. Head on over to the Facebook and Instagram page, give them a follow and a like. Download your favourite episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Pandora, YouTube. It should still be on Podbean or wherever else you get your podcasts from. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell anyone you think might like the show. Help spread the word and get the show out there. Why not leave a rating and review and help the show grow? Every review is appreciated. Don't forget, March 2025, the live begins. I'll be back in the next couple of weeks with a brand new episode, but until then, I'm the Tank, this is the Truth, and may the truth be with you.
Thank you.